The gospel we just heard, we would have heard it in Lent as well, because this is part of the Last Supper discourses that Jesus tells his disciples. There's a double way of looking at this, and I've mentioned this a couple of times already throughout Easter. There are two parts of Easter, and we're in the second part right now, the time after the Ascension. And in the time after the Ascension, we get presented the same readings that we had before the Passion of Christ, because we see them in a different light, in light of the resurrection. In a certain way, we see here Christ is kind of saying his farewells to his disciples. He's also warning them of what is to come. But also, while he's foretelling his departure, again, it's not an abandonment, but rather it's a departure with faith. It's a departure with confidence that the disciples will be able to carry on the work and the gospel that Jesus started. And so when we hear this, it's in the context of right before Christ's death, right before the Passion. Yet we hear it again after the resurrection, after that experience of the resurrection, in light of the Ascension. Because there's another departure. If the first departure was the Passion, but Jesus comes back from the dead, then there's the second departure, which is the Ascension. And he shall come again on the last day. And so there is this parallel between those two departures. Jesus departs, but not permanently, not to never come again, but waits for us at the end of time when he comes, but all is brought in him. Since the Ascension readings, and especially in the first reading we already have a foretelling of the feast we're going to celebrate on Sunday, Pentecost, the coming of the Holy Spirit. And so Jesus leaves us not to get away from us, not to abandon the world, but rather to prepare us and prepare the way for the Holy Spirit. The gift of the Holy Spirit is the gift of the Spirit of God himself. God who continues to act in this world, God who continues to be present. And so the coming of the Holy Spirit, again, leaves that ascension as not an abandonment, but, well, as a new beginning. And so it's proper that this Sunday is going to be the first Sunday when the church is open again, recalling that new beginning. Right now, we're in the middle of the first novena of the church. And depending how you count the Ascension originally is on Thursday. It's always 40 days after Easter Sunday, which falls on a Thursday, and it fell last Thursday. Although, for many different reasons, the feast gets pushed to the nearest Sunday. But if you start counting from that Thursday of the Ascension, it's 9 days before the Pentecost. And it's not for nothing that those 9 days are there. If anyone's ever done a novena before, you do a novena to pray for a grace. You're asking for something. And so those 9 days between the Ascension and the Pentecost marks the first novena of the church. Those disciples who witnessed Christ rise from the dead, Christ rise and return to the Father, now retreat for 9 days in prayer, in preparation for the gift of the Holy Spirit. And so their prayer is for something, and that something is the grace of the Holy Spirit. It's not for nothing that it's 9. Think about it, 9 months it takes for a woman in gestation to give birth. 9 months, something new comes out. And so those 9 days, if you will, is the gestation of the church, because Pentecost is the birthday of the church. And that we see is the fruit of this first novena. That incidentally marks the third part of Easter. There's 3 parts to Easter, although they're not equally separated. And so the first reading we hear, it catches a little bit of that sense of departing. Paul is departing his community, and they're saddened because they think he's not going to come back, and probably he's not. He leaves presbyters, he leaves someone in charge to continue the work that he began, knowing that, well, he has to go somewhere else. His mission wasn't to stay in Miletus forever. No, he had to keep on going. And so that first reading captures that sense of departing, but that hope that God will provide. It's the situation of the church that is gathered in the upper room in these 9 days, knowing that, well, they weren't meant to be there forever, locked up in fear, but rather to go out and spread throughout the world. Jesus commends the disciples to the Father through the Holy Spirit, and that Holy Spirit bears 7 gifts: wisdom, understanding, counsel, fortitude, knowledge, piety, and fear of God. And that's how the church is created. Incidentally, today is a feast of St. Augustine of Canterbury, the other St. Augustine. Most people don't know about this one. And, well, he's more popular in England than he is anywhere else because he's kind of the refounder of the church in England. He's also an example of that hope in the future. And we have to go all the way back to pretty much the 400s, the 500s, just when the Romans had abandoned Britain. St. Augustine of Canterbury was sent to reestablish the church after the Romans had left Britain. And little by little, when the Romans had left Britain and those few Britons that remained were overcome by the Saxons, who were later to be known as the Anglo-Saxons, they also brought back paganism with them. And so in a certain way, Britain was lost to paganism. And so St. Augustine of Canterbury is missioned to go by the Pope to England and reestablish the church in a place where it had been so strong before. And so the mission was very successful. Unfortunately, with the Reformation, that mission was interrupted. But England became one of the bastions of Christianity for such a long time. We are tasked today to continue a work and also to repopulate or restart a work, just as St. Augustine of Canterbury did in England. We are tasked to restart the church in light of the quarantine, a quarantine which affected everywhere in the world, the church throughout the world, and also the church right here in La Agrupación. We're retasked to restart this all over again. And so let us do that with the gift of that Holy Spirit, which each one of us bears by virtue of our confirmation and in what we bring in this year and what is to come, as we little by little get used to and assume normality once again. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit.
Amen.